So 2 nights ago, I attended a panel. The Jesuits of America magazine had a panel at Union Theological on the thought of René Girard, the French Catholic philosopher who died last year. How many of you are familiar with you? Okay. And last night they were in Boston, and as we speak, they are over at St. Paul's Church holding the panel again. So we'll have our own panel, our own reflection tonight. I'm going to review some of the main points of Girard and look at it from a Zen point of view. See what Zen might have to contribute, say about that. Illustrate it. Now, he's kind of like a philosophical anthropologist or anthropological philosopher, etc. And one of his main points is that all our desire is mimetic. Mimesis is from the Greek meaning to imitate. They say art is imitation, but life is imitation. So, as if we didn't know, and modern psychology confirms this, all our actions and reactions and desires we get it from others. We get it from our culture, we get it from our upbringing, we get it from all around us. It's in imitation. It's not something that comes that we decide on ourselves, that we construct. We are constructed. And it's really, really important to realize that all of what we think or feel has been learned, and we're conditioned by that. For better or worse, because it's a limitation as well as an enrichment, and as he says, goes on to say, the problem comes with mimetic rivalry when other groups and other cultures, and other ways of seeing the world clash and start, desiring the same thing and being in conflict with one another. But to become aware of this conditioning is really what the spiritual life, the psychological life is about, and certainly what Zen is about. So Jesus' solution was to say, the various ways of saying it, like being born again, but is to become like little children. So let go of all your conditioning, let go of all your expectations. Have the pure, simple openness to welcome whatever's given, whatever comes in your life. And also part of that is the child, as you know, in ancient culture, had no rights, no social standing. So going beyond our rights and social standing and all our pretenses and all our titles, etc., and being nothing is important in order for us to be free. Now, there's a wonderful koan in the 80th koan in the Blue Cliff record, which goes, in a sense, beyond that, in a way that Freud might approve of. Freud would say, of course, what do you mean taking a child, the way Jesus did to put it? The child, 5 or 6 years old, is already completely formed, already a lost cause. Right? So, what the koan does, in the 80th koan, it says, a monk asks Joshu, does a newborn baby, does a newborn baby have various ways of translating the 6 senses, the 6 consciousnesses? In Buddhism you have the 5 senses, and the 6th sense is actually not a movie, it's called a consciousness, an awareness. So even consciousness is just considered a sense organ. No big deal in Buddhism. So basically he's saying, does the baby have this? It's kind of like a basic apparatus, already kind of a basic conditioning, as Kant would say. But Joshu replies, well, it's like throwing a ball into the rapids, into the swift-flowing river. So, of course, the monk didn't get it. He went and asked another master, what did he mean by that? And the other master said, moment to moment, non-stop flow. Because you throw, you throw up a ball, a big red ball onto rapids, it just bounces along, right, wherever it's carrying. And he says that's what the pure experience of a newborn is. Before you have any conditioning, you just bounce along, freely, joyfully, along wherever it takes you. There's no resistance, there's no conditioning, there's no reacting, there's no clinging, there's no desire that it be anything else, it's just bouncing along wherever it goes. And that's the pure experience. You just accept and live with whatever is there. So there's no resistance, there's no desire and clinging on your own part. So that moment to moment, non-stop flow, accepting what is, as Eckhart Tolle would also say, that is an ideal. To be able to live with that kind of immediate openness and reactivity to what exactly it is, or non-reactivity, just going with the flow, literally. It's funny, just yesterday there was a review of a play about the brain, a review in the New York Times, and one of the concluding remarks the reviewer makes, quoting someone from the play, one of the neuropsychologists puts it this way: our brains are constantly, exhaustively working overtime to give us the illusion that we're in control. That's what the brain is always trying to, you gotta control it, you gotta get on top of this, you know? And we're not, it's an illusion. The brain builds a narrative to steady us from moment to moment. So we build narratives to kind of anchor us, and to control our fear, so that we're not just open to pure experience, so that we can steady ourselves. But the ball on the river does not steady itself. The whole joy of it is that you're just being carried, living the experience. This is kind of what, initiation rites were meant to do in ancient cultures. On the one hand, you're initiated into a culture, yes, into a particular society. But the way they do that is to throw the kid out into the desert, usually the male, because the male has the most pretensions of being in control. Throw them out into the desert where there's no social standing, where there's no conditioning, where there's no status, where there's no possibility of control, and then to have him discover what really is, which is what we do when we sit, or what the monks do in their monasteries. They're going out into the desert. You're going into the desert of your heart when you're sitting on the cushion and escaping that without status, without position. That usually winds up what happens to the people who are pursuing that anyway. You're trying to say, as they said on the panel, it's not who am I, but whose am I? Duncan Morrow suggested that. You're going to belong to something, to somebody. So it's either going to just be the group think and the power play of your group, or something greater that you learn to challenge by going deeper. Now, René Girard suggests that this is what happens. What happens is the culture winds up in its fight, winds up finding somebody who's different, somebody on the edge, and scapegoating them. Projecting all their stuff, all their evil onto that, so they don't have to look at it themselves, and scapegoating, making a sacrifice. And that's what happened to Jesus, for example. He was challenging the groupthink and the power play of the Roman Empire and the Jewish temple, and he wound up becoming the scapegoat, which of course the word itself comes from the Hebrew scriptures, when they literally took a goat and tied a red thread around its horns, and sent it out into the desert to projecting all this stuff onto him. So that's what he became. So you wind up killed or challenged by those who are in that groupthink, or in that mimetic rivalry that he speaks of. And of course, the Buddha followed that in his own way as well. The Buddha, of course, left behind his palace and his family and the whole thing, that whole group, that whole cultural determination. And he sat, even religiously, he was in this He followed for 6 years, as you know, the Hindu asceticism, and discovered, well, that this system is not working. And what was the great impulse out of that? A poor old woman brought in a little rice pudding. So someone socially on the margins, someone despised, someone on the outside, an old woman with no status, the victim, if you will, giving a simple act of kindness is what made him realize what rare reality was. So we have to avoid this kind of determination of culture and class and conditioning of power play and groupthink. And, well, now to illustrate a little bit of that, there's a wonderful koan here which I've never heard anybody comment on, and I've never commented on. It's the 30th koan in the 31st koan in the Momonkan. Roshi Albert Lowe from Montreal calls it the most difficult of the koans in the whole Momonkan. So that's what nobody talks about. But we're not going to obviously be able to discern it and exhaust it tonight. But it illustrates this kind of dynamic which we have to overcome, this kind of conflict of ways of seeing. So a monk asked an old woman, "Which way should I take to Mount Gotai?" Now, Mount Gotai is where Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, was supposed to live. So this was a place that monks would go to have a spiritual experience, and the woman probably had a tea house along the way. So the monk is asking, "Which is the way to Mount Gotai?" And the woman says, "Oh, go straight on." And of course, the monks don't get it. She's saying, "Go straight on with your practice." But they just take a few steps and start going straight towards Mount Gotai, as if geographically you would find the Buddha, find it. So after they had taken a few steps, she remarked, "He may look like a fine monk, but he goes off like that." So later a monk told Joshu about it. And Joshu said, "Wait a minute, I will go and see through that old woman for you." So the next day off he went and asked her the same question. And the old woman too gave her the same reply. So when he returned, Joshu announced to the monks, "I have seen through the old woman of Mount Gotai for you." Really? That's it? What does that mean? So was it exactly the same thing when Joshu asked her, and was it the same thing when she? And what was going on there? So Mumom's commentary kind of gives us a key here. The old woman knew how to work out a strategy and win the victory while sitting in her tent. So look, you got military imagery here. She's, conducting kind of a little battle, a little duel here. Yet she is not aware of the bandit stealing into the tent. Wow! So Joshu's compared to a bandit stealing into the tent. Old Joshu is skillful enough to creep into the enemy's camp and menace their fortress. Wow! Look at the world we're in here. The enemy's camp and a fortress? Is this what we want? Really? Is this enlightenment? So he continues, Muma, he does not look like a grown-up. Upon close examination, they are both at fault. Now tell me, how did Joshu see through the old woman? So why are they both at fault? Because they're conducting kind of games on each other. They're trying to get the better of each other. They're trying to see through each other, one here and one there, in a conflict like Girard is talking about, like we see all over the human history. So even though they're both enlightened, to a certain extent, it still hasn't gone all the way. They're both at fault here, because they're conflictual. There's no Joshu and no old woman separate from each other, so why are they acting as if there are? Not when you wake up fully. So that's what, a couple of the, he quotes Master Hakuin, the great Japanese master, Shibayama quotes him. Hakuin's comment on this koan is famous. You all understand that Joshu has seen through the old woman, and her tricks and all that. But tell me, did she see through Joshu? Well, this one is even better, I think. The Zen master is quoted as saying, how can water drench water? How can gold be changed into gold? They're both water, they're both gold. Why are they trying to contrast with each other? It's all the same. Be water through and through, be gold through and through. In the all-pervading seeing through the depths of things, how can there be Joshu or the old woman? The distinction, the conflicts disappear. If you let go of all that stuff. The whole universe has just been seen through. Yes. You see through the depths of everything. If you can become small enough, and newborn enough, and non-conditioned enough, and non-defensive enough, and non-fearful enough. So just to illustrate these last points. The very next koan is a non-Buddhist questions the Buddha. A non-Buddhist. It would be like having a catechism in the Catholic Church where a pagan comes along and gets the better of everything. A non-Buddhist questions the Buddha. And it turns out that Ananda, the Buddha's assistant, doesn't get it, whereas the non-Buddhist does. And so Ananda says, what realization did the non-Buddhist have that made him say that? And the World Liner One replied, he's like a high-nettled horse which starts at even at the shadow of the whip. So he was off and running at the slightest, indication of wisdom. Whereas the faithful Buddhist follower didn't get it yet. So that's deconstructing Buddhism. Get rid of the stink of Buddhism. Again, religions themselves can become, the conditioning and the pretension and, the obstruction precisely when they are limiting and when they give you an arrogant stance. So this is a reminder. Someone coming completely from the outside, they get further. They get further. And if you don't think we've made scapegoats and projected, just look at our own Western Christian history. All the scapegoats we've created throughout history. Jews, we even wound up saying that they were the ones who killed Christ, so the Jews, of course. Heretics, indigenous peoples whom we enslaved and murdered, gays, Muslims, of course. Scapegoats culture creates. Instead of realizing our unity with them, no Joshu and no old woman, no Buddhist and non-Buddhist, no gay or straight, we're all one. And if you just look at our society today, the buffoonery of the presidential campaign. Ooh, those Mexicans. Ooh, those Muslims. Ooh, whatever it is, projecting, scapegoating. Beyond all that, and it's usually the victim, usually the one on the side, usually the one who's neglected, the poor old woman with the. That's where the truth is. That's where Christ is. The Buddha is. I was a stranger, an immigrant, and you welcomed me. I was hungry and thirsty. You gave me food and drink. I was in prison and you visited me. That's where. Not with all the titles. So the last one, go through is number 42. This is another good example. It's called A Woman Comes Out of Meditation. So right away you've got a woman here, which is already, way down the social scale, right? Just like the old woman who gave the Buddha to eat and drink. So a woman was in meditation in the presence of the Buddha, and she was in samadhi, she was in consciousness, in satori, and she couldn't be awakened. So Manjusri, here we're back to Manjusri from Gautai, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, asked the Buddha, why can a woman be close to the Buddha's seat and I cannot? So here's the great Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjusri, and a woman is closer to the Buddha than he is. And he's wondering why this is. So the Buddha says, well, you awaken this woman from her meditation and ask her for yourself. So Manjusri walks around the woman 3 times, snaps his fingers, and took her up to the Brahma heaven and tried all the supernatural powers, but he could not bring her out of meditation. The great Manjusri, with all the titles and all the poor woman in meditation. So he had to meet defeat, but down below, past 1,200,000,000 countries, as innumerable as the sands of the Ganges, there is the Bodhisattva called Mongyos, the bottom of the 52 levels of Bodhisattva, and he snaps his fingers once and she wakes up. So the great Manjusri couldn't do it, but the very lowest one, Bodhisattva, all just snapped his fingers. So it's in the utter, open, simplicity, unconditioned, bobbing of the ball along the water, that utter simple openness of the newborn, right on the side of the victims and the scapegoats of history, and you can find wisdom. Just like it's your own breath of the scriptures, blade of grass, the koan says, is the temple. The simplest thing. The simplest thing. So the only way out of what Gerard is speaking of is utter purgation, utter waking up to the simplicity and purity beyond conditioning and beyond the rivalry, beyond all rivalry, and utter openness and acceptance. So, any reactions or questions? Yeah.
Did Buddha, I guess in your opinion, did Buddha and Christ live lives of meditation?
Of course, they did. They were formed by their culture. But the desert experience, the enlightenment experience, the baptism experience, in Christ's case, whatever, woke them up to, whenever they woke up, Christ might have been awakened long before them. But the point is, there was a direct connection to reality. Jesus called it his Father. And the Buddha was just, I and all reality found the path. But there has to be that individual desert experience that makes you see the utter relativity, conditioned quality of all conditions. So you're not duped by them, you're not prisoner of them. My way or the highway, my culture, my nation, my religion, my ethnic group, whatever.
So if Jesus got the experience through the desert, why did he have to die?
But he didn't have to. That's another whole issue.
Okay.
He had to die because he was human, and he accepted the human condition to its fullness, including challenging the power structures and the groupthink, which will always get you killed. So beware if you want to be enlightened. If you want to be enlightened, you'll wind up being crucified. I'm just giving you the heads up.
Okay.
That's normally what's going to happen. Because you're a threat. So you'll be scapegoated. You're a threat to the power structure. So this is pure Jirai. You'll be scapegoated and you'll be victimized. But that's why you have to learn to recognize it's precisely in the victim that you find the truth. So every time, for example, the Catholic Church scapegoats, some group in history, Jesus is in the scapegoat, not in the church. That's the mystery. Yeah.
So the idea of the outsider
Right.
kind of getting it reminds me of the
Right.
convert who seems to catch on and get it before some of the devout people born in the faith.
Yeah, because they've not been challenged. They've taken a low level of devotion and thought that was it, for their whole life, because it was so enculturated that they didn't really see the transcendent quality of it, I think. Well, we should do the vows.